the ever-growing economy, the unparalleled workforce, and the exceptional volume production. This is how we know China, and it may appear as the only rival to the United States. However, the spotlight has been shifted from this domination to the recent Russia-Ukraine crisis. And since this was left out, Chinese domination has been replaced with an imminent economic collapse. Only a few are paying attention to the growing tensions within China. No one could guess that China is struggling with a sharp decrease in its population. This will be a rude wake-up call to its dominance in industry and production. Even the quality of production is declining. China is fighting an internal battle with non-performing loans. These are the loans that China offered to other countries, but now the borrowers are defaulting and cannot pay them back. These are not the only issues, and this is the reason why China's economy has come to a precarious stage. What is China going through, and how is Xi Jinping's domination over China loosening? This is what the world has forgotten since the Russia-Ukraine crisis arose, but now the challenges to China are becoming visible. Therefore, let's uncover how China's economy is on the brink of collapse, and what are the reasons behind this. The world knows China for its large population. It is the most populous country on the planet. This population domination gives China an upper hand. For example, it used to have the most efficient labor force that increased the production of goods directly. This, in turn, led China to increase its exports to every country in the world. But now, China is losing this status. According to the recent statistics, China has the fastest aging population in human history. It's also the country with the highest sex imbalance. China has come to a point where it is, perhaps, theoretically impossible to maintain the population as it was before. The reason goes back to China's one-child policy that controlled the ever-increasing population. The loss this policy has forced China to incur cannot be compensated for in the next 35 years. Currently, there are not enough Chinese in childbearing age who could birth enough babies to counteract the damage done by the one-child policy. But the havoc does not end here. According to the statistics, by 2100, there would be half the number of Chinese as compared to the population now. This gave enough time for China to make amends. However, lately, the Chinese demographers hinted at the intensity of this issue. These demographers said that they do need some more data to prove the fact. However, they estimate by 2050, not by 2100, China would have half the population as compared to now. They were all overestimating the population, and this is the very reason why they thought there is a need for the one-child policy. The loss it incurred is today irreversible. This population bubble has done more harm than good. Since the labor cost has increased, the decline in the population has left China to produce fewer goods at high prices. Thus, China is no longer producing all its products at a low cost. This affects the trade China does with all other countries and the amount of revenue it generates. Earlier, China could earn from its low-quality products since they were sold at lower prices. But now, even these products are costing the international markets more. This less efficient, low-quality, and high-cost production is going to push China toward an irreparable loss. President Xi Jinping knows that, and he also knows the economic, financial, and political stages China is standing on now. He also knows that the economic model in China has collapsed, and he needs to find a way that can prevent all of that. This is proved by the studies that are going on in Beijing. In Beijing, a study about the Soviet Union collapse has been started to know why the Soviet Union was divided into pieces. Since China is following the Soviet Union's economic model, it has to upgrade the policy to prevent, at any cost, the collapse it is heading toward. In some areas of China, the natives have been asked to stockpile foods and products. This isn't proof that China is expecting to make a gigantic economic comeback. Rather, it hints toward the opposite worst-case scenario. The population bubble isn't the only reason why China is internally struggling. Money is another one. China started its Belt and Road Initiative and offered loans to member countries of the project. According to aid data, China has offered about $385 billion in debts to these countries, and since the world is coping with inflation, the interest rate has increased, which is putting a burden on the countries that took these loans. Not only that, but since China offered the loans, the banks and financial institutions are finding it hard to deal with these non-performing loans. These banks are a key factor for China's domestic investment and economy. But since there is not enough money in these banks, the flow of domestic loans has also stopped. Lending loans to the neighboring countries may appear to be a smart policy, but this has cost China its own domestic progress. Real estate in China is also struggling, and according to S&P, 20 to 40% of property developers may face losses. This, in turn, will have a dire impact on China's economy, since property development accounts for 25 to 30% of China's economy. Another far more complex and solid threat to China is its backing up Russia in the Russia-Ukraine crisis. The world owes everything to globalization, and China's driving force is globalization. This is the very power that lets China trade with every other country in the world. And the facts and figures tell the whole story. The majority of the trade is exports for China, not imports. In other words, globalization allows China to sell its products in the international market, and without it, China would be alienated. It would not have enough buyers to sell the volume production of the goods. This, on the one hand, will decline the revenue it generates from exports, while on the other hand, this will leave the majority of China's population unemployed. Since China is backing Russia in the crisis, there are estimates that China also has to face sanctions. Recently, the United States has warned China that sanctions may be imposed on countries supporting Russia. Russia can fight these words battles with the United States and actual battle with Ukraine on the cost of oil and gas it produces. However, China is an energy importer, and choosing Russia over globalization may leave China away from the world bloc. The Chinese leadership knows that the loan lending policy has already caused enough loss for China's economy, but still, China seems to be with Russia. However, we have not seen any strong support from China for Russia, but everyone knows that China will be nearer to Russia than the United States. At present, China is very precisely making its way through its presently fragile economy, and it can continue to do so. However, if China gets too near to Russia, sanctions may follow, and China would face the gravest losses. Globalization and international trade are what keep the Chinese economy running, and these are the very ingredients that can push China to the sides until reaching the brink of collapse. Another threat that keeps the tensions between China and the United States going on is the imminent invasion of Taiwan. It's being estimated that as Russia has invaded Ukraine, China may follow the lead and try to invade Taiwan. Analysts believe that now the questions would be more about when this will happen, not about whether or not will this happen. Even if this issue does not raise its head, China backing Russia has somehow increased the tensions between China and the United States already, and this is directly impacting the multinational companies based in China. In the same way as the investors pulled off their investments from Russia during the war crisis, this can also happen with China. And according to news, the investors in China are already feeling threatened due to the growing tensions. If they decide to take their investments and leave China, this will be a great loss for China's economy. However, at present, China does not seem to be in any condition to launch its invasion of Taiwan. Xi Jinping knows everything, both internally and externally, and he would definitely have plans for China's economy. Therefore, no one can tell what's happening inside China better than the Chinese leadership itself. But one thing is certain from all these reasons. China really is facing both internal and external issues. This may give China a major wake-up call, mainly due to long-term issues like the population bubble, non-quality production, and non-performing loans.